Welcome. runZero is a network discovery and asset inventory platform that discovers all of your managed and unmanaged assets. And it doesn't matter if these devices are in the cloud or on-premise, if they're found in your IT environment or your OT environment. In this video, I'm going to take you on a tour of the product. You'll be able to see how our unauthenticated scanner reveals an astonishing amount of detail about your assets. You'll also see how our growing list of integrations enables some really practical use cases. And then finally, you'll see how runZero works with your existing IT and security solutions. Let's get started.
All right, getting started with the product tour here. As you can see, I'm already logged into the runZero console. And I want to start by showing you what are the types of attributes or level of detail that we are able to discover without any sort of authentication, meaning that we're using an unauthenticated scanning capability. And the best way to show this to you is to go into the asset inventory and bring up an asset and have a look at the details. runZero uses a security research-based approach for discovery and fingerprinting. Examples of this include looking in printer caches to know the MAC addresses of assets, or leveraging SSH banners or HTTP banners to gather details about assets. And here are some of the details that we're able to gather. So we know the operating system of this asset. We were able to discover the endpoint protection software that's on this asset, as well as the Windows domain for this box. People are often very surprised by how much detail we're able to learn about assets, even though we're not authenticating onto the box. We don't have an agent on that box or anything like that. Before I scroll down further, I do want to call out these two magnifying glasses. This one here will do a search against the inventory for this attribute with this value. So here I'm doing a search in the inventory for all the assets that are configured for VLAN number 1. Right, so this is a good way for you to pivot from a particular asset to a search in the asset inventory and go back and forth. This particular magnifying glass does a frequency analysis. So I would use this one to see, oh, okay, I have 91 assets that are configured for VLAN number 1. This is great for telling you what is uncommon versus uncommon in terms of values for a particular attribute. All right, coming down here, we can see that we also have details around services. These are the protocols that are running on the box, and these are the individual services on this particular asset. So I can see there's a web service, there's Windows SMB services, and so on and so forth. And for each individual service, we also have more details. So not just asset level detail, but also service level detail. One of the coolest details I find is this Favicon. So here we are capturing the picture for the web service running on this asset. And we also provide the MD5 hash. And of course, you can click on this magnifying glass and do a search against the inventory for all the assets that are essentially have this particular web service running. So it's a very interesting way to search and slice and dice your asset inventory to whittle down to the exact set of assets that you're interested in. Again, lots of details down the rest of this asset detail page, and all discovered without any authentication whatsoever. A completely unauthenticated scanning capability. Earlier, I mentioned that runZero is a network discovery and asset inventory platform. So what does that network discovery look like? Well, this is an example of what you can do with runZero when you go beyond the unauthenticated scanning capability. Right? If provided with SNMP credentials, we can tell you a lot about layer 2 on your network. Right? This is a Netgear switch, and because we have provided SNMP credentials, we're able to populate this layer 2 information panel. Here I can see that there are 3 upstream links off of the switch, as well as numerous downstream links. And of course, I can click on each of these IP addresses to bring up the asset details. But there's another way for you to consume this type of layer 2 information, and that's through runZero's reporting. We have a switch topology report. And the switch that we were looking at earlier was the .34 here, and I can quickly see that there are 9 downstream assets hanging off of it. And if I double click on it, I can see the individual host names and IP addresses. If I want to, I can dig deeper into the individual assets as well. Going back to the switch details, I want to call out another feature. This is not L2 related. It's the screenshots. So if the runZero Explorer, and I'll explain later what the Explorer is. If the runZero Explorer is installed on a machine that has a Chromium browser, we can also capture the index page of the web services. You can see these screenshots by going to Asset Details like we've done here, or you can go to the Dedicated Screenshots tab, and you can take a look at the screenshots of index pages on various web services. Most often you're looking at login pages, right? But sometimes you find something unexpected. All right, going back to the asset inventory. Earlier I mentioned that runZero is helps you discover all of your managed and unmanaged assets. One particular class of unmanaged assets that people are often interested in is IoT devices. And here I've brought up all the smart TVs that I have in my inventory. I'm going to dig into this first one here, but do take a look here at this mouse over. You'll notice that in the last IP address, the .185, there's a star next to it. Just remember that because we're going to come back to that. All right, so this is what IoT Discovery looks like with runZero. We are able to identify not just the operating system, but also the hardware. And this is often a challenge for other types of asset discovery solutions. But runZero's fingerprinting excels at identifying the hardware that the asset actually is. Another area where runZero excels, where other asset discovery solutions might not, is this ability to create a single system of record, even though there are multiple IPs on this particular asset. Right? There are other asset discovery solutions that might actually quintuple count. Right, create 5 different records for this particular asset because there are 5 different IP addresses, but not with runZero. The fingerprinting is sophisticated enough that we're able to identify that an asset is an asset is an asset. All right. One other thing to point out here is the secondary address. A primary address is an IP address that was directly scanned by runZero. The secondary address is something that we learned indirectly, right? This goes back to our security research-based approach, but we are able to tell you about your network, even if we have not directly scanned it, right? So here we know that there's this 192.168.20 subnet, and it is one of the addresses that this particular asset is listening on. And we also know that we did not scan it because it is counted as a secondary address. And runZero does a lot of this stuff, telling you about subnets or segments on your network that you might not know about. Another example of this is the unmapped MAX report. Here we can tell you that there are these assets that are hanging off of this switch, hanging off of this particular switch port that we've not scanned, right? So there may be some segments that you previously didn't know about, or what have you, that were not scanned by runZero. And this might be something you want to dig further into. Aside from that, also along the lines of helping you know your network, is the RFC 1918 coverage report. Right. So here you can see the what we've scanned in terms of the internal addresses, the RFC 1918 addresses. And you can see that we've scanned all of the 192.168 and 172.16, but we've not. We only barely scanned the 10 dot subnets. And here you can see that we've scanned all of these subnets. We can switch over here and see that this particular subnet is utilized this much, whereas that one is not really utilized at all. There is a use case here where some customers can use this for capacity planning for their internal IP address ranges. You can also see where how your assets are distributed over these subnets if you want to. But going back to the idea of helping you know your network, helping you know about subnets that you might not have previously known about, you'll notice here that even though we've barely scanned the 10 dot subnets, we know that there are assets listening on them, right? So here we can say we can see that within this particular subnet, we have 7 assets that are listening on addresses within that subnet, even though runZero did not directly scan them there. So this might be a future target for you to do more runZero scans. Okay. Also along the lines, for the purposes of helping you get to know your network and get to know your assets, we have additional reports that are really helpful. One of these is the Outlier Overview Report. And this one, what it can tell you is, hey, show me the uncommon assets within my network based on a certain field, based on a certain attribute. So you can see, okay, within this particular org, within this particular site, I have this outlier asset. It's actually an AWS EC2 instance, right? Another report that also talks about outliers, helping you understand like what's unusual in your network, things that you might want to look into further, is the specific outlier report, right? So here, maybe what I want to do is I want to see if there are assets that have a lot of services running on them, right? And this creates a report. This will be produced in a moment. And here I can see, oh, hey, I have an asset that happens to be listening, happens to have 95 services on it, right? So this is another type of outlier where I might want to dig into a little bit further. Another way for you to consume that sort of outlier information is through our dashboards. And let's switch over here, and as you can see, we have numerous graphs over here that tell you about, what is the most often seen versus least often seen for specific attributes that might be of interest. All right, and for each of these, if you want, you can dig further into that and take a look in this particular format. All right, so over here, these are the most common protocols that we're seeing, and then here's the least common. All for the purposes of helping you understand your network, know your network, learn about your network, as well as your assets.
Now that we're part of the way through the product tour, it's a good idea to take a look at the architecture diagram to see all of this in context. The interface that we've been working in so far is known as the runZero console. We have been using the SaaS version, but runZero Enterprise customers have the option to self-host the console. Oftentimes, this is deployed on-premise in order to support air-gapped environments. I also mentioned earlier that there's something known as the runZero Explorer. This is the software that you would deploy onto one of your hosts in order to scan your network. Typically, customers start off with just a single runZero Explorer and then install additional Explorers only as necessary depending on the L2 segmentation or firewall configuration of the environment. As mentioned before, the runZero Explorer can go beyond an unauthenticated scan and leverage SNMP to gather information from high-value nodes on the network, such as switches. There's also a version of the runZero Explorer that does not send scan results back to the console. This is known as the runZero Scanner and is typically used to do discovery on air-gapped environments. Now that you have a better understanding of the role of the runZero Explorer, let's go ahead and take a look at how you would configure one in order to conduct a scan. Here we have the Explorer's scan configuration page. And if you're just getting started with runZero, you could simply come down to initialize scan and get started with no configuration. The default discovery scope is configured based on the host where you deployed the Explorer. But after a little bit, you probably want to start leveraging all the flex availability that's available in the scan configuration. You can come here to adjust the number of packets per second that are being sent by the Explorer. On the Advanced tab, you can adjust the TCP ports that are being used for TCP scanning, the packets per second per host, as well as the subnet sampling rate. Here you can provide your SNMP credentials for the switches, and you can also adjust the probes that are being used by the Explorer, enable or disable as you wish. For customers that have a lot of different scans, We also provide scan templates that allow you to reconfigure multiple scans at once. Something else that I would like to share with you is the idea of hosted zone explorers. So these are not explorers that you would deploy internally in your own environment. Rather, these are explorers that are deployed and managed by runZero. And you would use these to scan your assets that are externally facing. So for example, I can change the discovery scope to public all, and this will scan all the externally facing IP addresses for the assets in your organization. We can also do something like the following, where runZero will then go out and find all the hosts in this particular domain and use that as your scan target. Obviously, please use your own domain name as opposed to the one I used in this example. Another feature in runZero that is geared towards externally facing assets is the external assets report. Here is a version of this report that I generated earlier. And as you can see, what we're doing here is we're taking all of your externally facing assets within this org, we're grouping them by a certain attribute and then sorting it by count. So in this case, within this org, I have 454 externally facing assets that run Linux. There's other useful externally facing details within this report, like the unscanned external subnets. We've seen other reports in this product tour so far. One thing that's worth noting is these are not all the reports that are available in runZero. If you come over here to view all, and you can see a list of all the reports that are available to you. Let's take another look at the architecture diagram to see how runZero works with your existing IT and security solutions. Aside from the unauthenticated scanning capability, integrations are a key component to runZero. And there are two types of integrations, Ingress and Egress. With the Ingress integrations, what we can do is bring in asset details from other sources via API in order to enrich the asset detail that we have in the asset inventory. In the next section, let's focus on bringing in information about cloud assets. Back into the product, let's focus on runZero's capabilities for bringing in details about cloud resources via API. Rather than running a scan, you would simply connect to AWS, GCP, or Azure, and runZero can bring in these details on a recurring basis. Let's have a look at one of these assets to see what this looks like. Here we have an AWS EC2 instance, and you'll notice that there are two different sources. The first one being the runZero unauthenticated scanner, the second being the AWS Ingress integration. On the right-hand side, we have our unauthenticated scanner details, but most importantly for this example, we have details from the AWS integration. The supported cloud resources include virtual machines, databases, as well as load balancers. In Azure, we also support service sets, and in AWS and Azure, we also support serverless functions. We return to the architecture diagram to expand our view of runZero's capabilities. In this next section, I want to focus on another set of Ingress integrations. These are against EDRs, endpoint detection and remediation, MDMs, mobile device management, as well as vulnerability management solutions. You'll see in the next section of the product tour that, of course, we're going to be bringing in details about assets, but we're also going to be bringing in details about other types of entities, which enables other types of use cases. So far, we have seen runZero's capabilities for discovering assets that are live on the network and the network topology amongst them, as well as cloud resources and externally facing assets. With integrations against EDRs and MDMs, runZero is able to inventory assets even if they might be offline at this time. To bring in this data, simply connect to your EDR or your MDM. Let's see how this looks with the CrowdStrike EDR. You'll notice here that many of these assets have information from multiple sources. Again, even when runZero is bringing information from multiple sources, it is still considered a single asset, a single system of record. Here is an example of an asset that runZero knows about solely through the CrowdStrike API. Digging into this, you can see that we have all these details from CrowdStrike. And if we want, we can go ahead and scan this asset so that we get other details as well. Another way that customers like to leverage some of these Ingress integrations
is to look for endpoints that are missing a certain solution. So in this case, I can run a query to look for assets that are missing the CrowdStrike EDR. And now I have a list of endpoints that I can target to improve my security posture. As I mentioned before, runZero can go beyond asset details. Here we have our software inventory that lists software installed on assets in this organization. It is populated both by our unauthenticated scanner as well as through our integrations. If you're interested in software on a particular asset, simply bring up its asset details and go to the software pane. Another way that runZero goes beyond assets is by bringing in vulnerability data via an integration. Oftentimes, there's so many high and critical vulnerabilities, it is difficult to understand what's really important. One way you can prioritize is by searching across asset details and vulnerability details at the same time. Here, I'm not just looking for any critical vuln, but one that's on a specific piece of hardware that has a publicly facing IP address. Using a comprehensive asset inventory along with your vuln scanner can level up your vulnerability management program. Another way that runZero works well with vuln scanners is by helping you to see what your vuln scanning coverage looks like against the real estate of your full asset inventory. Here, I am looking for all assets that are not being covered by any of my vuln scanners. Speaking of vulnerabilities, now is a good time to introduce you to our Rapid Response Program. As new vulnerabilities are reported in the news, runZero regularly posts important information, including search queries, to help you determine if you have any assets that are potentially vulnerable. And because runZero is designed to gather as much information as possible, you can run these search queries without having to rescan your network, allowing for a more immediate response. Now, of course, this is not an actual vuln scan, and we do recommend that you always run a full vuln scan whenever possible. These search queries are delivered to runZero customers via the query library. Let's take a look at some of these queries and see what they do. IT engineers might be very interested to know about assets that are coming up on end of life soon, assets that need to be refreshed and recycled. Something else that might interest IT engineers are TLS certificates that might be expiring soon and need to be renewed. Over on the security side, we might be interested to know about web services that require authentication, but it's being done over plain old HTTP, not encrypted. Something else that has security implications are assets that are listening on both a private IP as well as a public IP, so a possible pivot point from the outside to the internal network. By the way, another way to visualize this public-private pivot is through the Network Bridges report. Here I'm going to filter this down specifically to assets that are also listening on RDP. And so here you can see a list of assets that listen on both private as well as public IP subnets. And of course, by the search filter here, are also listening on RDP. So a possible pivot point from the outside to the inside. And now I would like to pivot this product tour over to another feature that allows runZero to work with your other IT and security solutions. runZero has the ability to alert via email, Slack, and other channels about a variety of events, but perhaps the ones that are of most interest to customers are when new assets come online or if assets have changed. You'll notice this is the first time I'm talking about a way that data from runZero goes out to another system. Let's hop over to the integration page and take a look at the full list of integrations. Many of these integrations are Ingress integrations that we have discussed throughout this product tour. However, there are a few integrations that are egress in nature, that are used to either populate a CMDB in an IT services management solution, or to help with an investigation or detection effort. Aside from the native integrations, runZero also has a full REST API if you want to create your own integration. And finally, if you're looking to just use runZero data in a more ad hoc manner, it is also possible to export the asset inventory in a variety of formats. runZero offers many ways to work with your existing IT and security solutions. All right, if you made it this far into the product tour, first of all, thank you very much. Thank you. And two, you're probably interested to know about how you can run these explorers on your own network, to scan your own network. Well, the good news is these explorers are available for a variety of platforms. And if you were to log into your runZero console account, you can see the minimum system specifications. So your next question, of course, is, Huxley, how do I get a runZero console account? Well, I'm glad you asked that question.
The easiest way to do that is to sign up for a free trial. You'll notice here we have two different editions of the free trial, both of which do not require a credit card. The Enterprise Pro Edition is a limited time trial that allows you to test out nearly every single feature in runZero. It does require a business email address. The second one is the Starter Edition. This is the free forever edition with limited features, and it's great for those at home or student researcher type of use cases. You just drop in your email address here and then click on the button to get started with runZero. So give it a try. See what runZero can do for you.
So there you have it. runZero discovers all of your managed and unmanaged assets, either through an unauthenticated scanner powered by high-fidelity fingerprinting, or one of our integrations against your existing IT or security solutions, including vulnerability management, endpoint detection and remediation, as well as cloud service providers like AWS, Azure, and GCP. If you're interested in learning about other runZero features and functions, please check out the other videos in the runZero product walkthrough series.